The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've been sort of trying to quantify the cognitive dissonance and the ideological commitment to Donald Trump that's present among some Republicans. And we've got some new polling data that suggests it's even worse than we thought. Donald Trump has successfully convinced some Trumpists that voter fraud, not voter suppression, is a major problem. And about half of Republicans say that they would actually be in favor of postponing the 2020 presidential election until the country, presumably under the leadership of Donald Trump, could fix the non-existent problems that Donald Trump has identified. This is based on a sample of 650 Republicans. It's amazing that this is the reality in the United States. A sample of 650 Republicans or Republican leaners. The sample was weighted to match the Republican Party at large in terms of sex, age, race, and education. They were initially asked some preliminary questions, and then respondents were asked, did Donald Trump win the popular vote? Did millions of undocumented immigrants vote illegally? How often does voter fraud actually occur? About half of Republicans believe that Donald Trump won the popular vote. Of course, he lost by pretty significant margin for a presidential election.
2.9 million votes, about 2 percentage points.
Close to 3 million votes. And that's similar to other polls that have asked Republicans the same question, not an outlier in that sense. 68% of Republicans do believe that millions of illegal immigrants voted illegally. That is nearly 3 out of 4. More than 2/3 of Republicans believe the idea that a whole bunch, millions of illegal immigrants voted. 73% of Republicans believe that voter fraud happens somewhat or very often, even though we have anecdotally, a dozen cases over the last billion-plus ballots that have been cast. And then the survey asked 2 questions about postponing the 2020 election. If Donald Trump were to announce that the 2020 presidential election should be postponed until the country can make sure that only eligible American citizens can vote, would you support postponing the election? 52% of Republicans say if Trump wants to do it, they would support delaying the 2020 election.
The thing is, we already are concerned that we're heading towards a constitutional crisis. That's when one branch of powers can't be checked by the other two. And when Trump floats the idea of firing Jeff Sessions or Andrew McCabe or Robert Mueller, there's this fear that he'll be able to get away with it and that Congress can't effectively check him. If this was to happen where he postponed the 2020 election for his own benefit,
it's the epitome.
That would be the end. But luckily, just his supporters wanting that to happen isn't going to make it actually happen.
Hopefully not, yeah. And also, respondents were asked, what if Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress were united in saying that the 2020 presidential election should be delayed? Then it goes up to 56% of Republicans saying, yeah, I think if Trump and congressional Republicans said we have to delay the election, we would be in favor of delaying the election. And obviously, the more you believe Trump's lies about the popular vote and illegal voters, the more likely you are to support this hypothetical postponement of the election. This is what lunatic right-wingers said Obama was going to do. Remember, there was no evidence Obama was going to declare martial law and push off the election to make himself Emperor, King Obama, whatever. No evidence that that was going to happen. And you still had lunatic right-wingers saying Obama's not going to relinquish power. You now actually have Trump falsely talking about voter fraud. And these individuals, basically it's a 50-50 shot, say, if Trump wanted to postpone the election because of the voter fraud he alleges exists, I would be in favor of that.
You know, after 9/11, New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani wanted to push his term into the following year, into 2002, and delay the transition of power. To deal with 9/11 and the cleanup and everything else. And maybe you could think that's a valid reason. If Trump, with his idea of floating all these distractions, perhaps war with North Korea, uses that as an excuse for keeping his own power for an extra few months or years, do you think that would work?
No. Right? I mean, no. Who would really allow that? Like, even if half of Republicans want that and Trump starts saying, listen, I believe that there is a conspiracy to get me out of power until I am sure that we will have a fair election. We are not going to have an election. It could never happen.
I'm on board with you here. I think the Constitution prevents against that sort of thing.
How would Trump even try to justify it, right? Hey, we had major voter fraud, people. Huge, big league. Buses bringing in Hillary voters. I actually won the popular vote in 2016. Did you know that? My generals, I consulted with them. 3 to 5 million illegals. We got to resolve that problem, folks, before we can open the voting. Just a temporary delay, people. Believe me, very, very temporary, tremendously temporary. We're very close to having the most fair election in the world. This will be a level of fairness in elections, the likes of which no country has ever seen before.
The most fair ever.
But we need a little more time. Barron is working with the Russian... I'm sorry. Barron is working with the IT people. Amazing what Barron can do with computers these days. Steve Jobs, great computer guy, great guy overall. He knew about nuclear and very serious things. Very temporary. Election soon, okay?
I think even the Trump supporters realize that there's a small chance of this guy actually winning re-election.
Right.
But, maybe I'm speaking too soon because very few people thought he would actually run and then win the nomination and then win some debates and then become president.
Who knows anything at this point? And in the background is always the reality that if Trump was Putin's puppet, this is exactly what Putin would want Trump to be doing, right? Talk about how core mechanisms of our democracy have been destabilized. We can't even trust our elections at all. We've got to delay the election. Not that that would actually happen, but even the attack on the integrity of our elections through voter fraud. Voter suppression is very real, and we'll have a great investigative piece about that in the next couple of weeks. But even attacking the idea that the elections are legit from the voter fraud side, that benefits other world leaders who want to sort of posture geopolitically against or in contrast to the United States.
Maybe Trump will pull a Vladimir Putin here and go back and forth between being president and prime minister.
Sure.
Now, of course, we don't have a prime minister here, but he would find a way.
Trump could create that. Listen, folks, president only doesn't make any sense. I'm going to run this like a business, and part of that is being a prime minister to make deals while President Barron Trump or whoever, or Melania. Melania's incredible. Melania's truly, truly incredible. Here legally, never worked here illegally.
Immigrant, no need to see her birth certificate.
No need to see her birth certificate at all, or her work authorization from when she was modeling here. I don't really think this is going to be a discussion that will be a pressing issue, but it is stunning the degree to which some of these Trumpists have become totally bamboozled by the Trump thing. I'm on Twitter at @DPacman. Show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. Follow me there.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Marshall Pilgreen. Marshall, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. We do depend on the support of members like Marshall to keep the show going, and you can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Also, don't forget, if you don't want to deal with membership, you just want to throw us a couple bucks, you can go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show. We surpassed for the first time ever 1,900 individual patrons, and our immediate target is 2,000 patrons. Help us make it happen at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Let's go to the phones at 617-830-4750. Always great to hear what's on the mind of people in the audience. We will go to our caller from the 864 area code. Caller from 864, what's your name and what are you calling about today?
Hi, my name is Raymond. I actually have called in before. I was the guy that asked if you thought that it was possible that the left would be rounded up at some point in time.
Yeah.
But basically, I was wondering. It seems like the country is becoming more and more vulnerable, especially with the freedom of speech being decimated right now. And I'm curious. Do you think that we're headed for something big soon, or because I feel like Trump's making a lot of moves with the world wars going on. It's getting kind of chaotic, and it feels like I don't know what to expect next.
Yeah. So Raymond, in what ways do you believe that free speech is being decimated? Like, what specifically are you thinking of?
I mean, the internet, for one. I honestly feel like that's our biggest voice in the world. Just as one-on-one civilians, that's taking our voice away. And with YouTube, like it seems like censorship is in every company right now. Google, YouTube, Facebook, you name it.
And you're saying, like, I guess I'm just trying to figure out exactly what you mean. You're talking about, like, what kind of censorship is happening? Are you talking about the YouTube advertiser boycott, or are you thinking about content being removed, or what are you talking about?
It's honestly a little bit of everything, but the way I look at it is there's just a huge attack on independent media right now. Like, it's anything that's not mainstream media is being, like, there's Washington Post ads, every other article, you know, like, it's
I mean, listen, there's sort of like a multi-pronged attack
media
going on right now on media, right? There's Trump and his talk about libel lawsuits against media, and also, you know, this sort of designation of fake news that he's been talking about. Then we've got all the net neutrality stuff that's going on and the attempts to roll back internet freedom in that means. And then you've also got this sort of huge reallocation of money as a result of the YouTube ad boycott and a lot of what's been going on there. So I don't know that I would call it restrictions on free speech right now, although we're starting to go in the direction of, listen, if Trump could infringe on people's free speech rights to stop critical reporting about himself, he would absolutely do it. And that's why I think we need to be really careful right now, watching the, you know, it's difficult when day to day you see small changes. Sometimes it can be hard to realize when big things change. And that's why it's important to keep a sort of 30,000 foot view on what's going on. And hey, you know, not to take your call, Raymond, and turn it into a plug, but we really got to be supporting independent media financially so that we're able to defend ourselves, like we're dealing with from bogus copyright claims and all sorts of stuff. So I share your concerns, my friend.
All right. Well, you have a good one. Keep it up.
All right. Thanks very much. Always good to hear from Raymond. We're taking calls at 617-830-4750. Let's go to our next caller. Why don't we go to the 905 area code? I'm liking that. Our caller from 905, tell us your name, where you're calling from, and what's on your mind today.
Hi there. My name's David as well. I'm from a small town right outside, well, not really small, but it's a town right outside Toronto called Ajax.
Okay.
I've been a fan of yours for a while, actually. The first video I saw was when you were debating that professional coon, Jesse Lee Peterson.
Well, listen, that's not a word I use. He happens to be black, but I'd call him an uninformed guy on the radio. I don't know that I'd go with the racial slurs necessarily.
Okay, fair enough. But I actually stumbled on that video through Secular Talk, and I watch all kinds of videos like TYT, because American politics just interests me in general. But I was going to call last week, but I ended up having to go to work because I saw some debates on TYT between Cenk and Ben and Hassan and some other guy. And I was just wondering if you would ever go to Politicon and debate these right-wingers, because I feel like you would eviscerate them.
Listen, people have been asking me if I'd go and do a Politicon debate. I would. I don't know if anybody wants me there, right? I mean, if I was invited, I would be glad to go. I have not been invited, but I would have no problem showing up there and talking about whatever issue people want to talk about, as long as it's an issue I'm familiar with, right? I mean, if it's not an issue that's in my wheelhouse, I probably wouldn't be the best person, but sure, why wouldn't I show up there?
What did you think of the debates from the most recent Politicon? I mean, it seems like a lot of these guys, they're not going to be taken down because they just know their stuff. And it seems like it's not so much of a debate as if it is just people expressing their views as if they're in their own echo chambers.
Yeah, I got a lot of emails, and David, you might be able to attest to this as well. I got a lot of emails from people saying, hey, Ben destroyed Cenk, or Cenk destroyed Ben, or Anna Kasparian destroyed Ann Coulter, or vice versa. I watched, 10 or so minutes of most of those big debates. I found that everybody came sort of prepared to put their perspective out there. I might have missed like the big takedown moments, but I thought they were pretty tame by and large in terms of a big win.
Yeah, it was like a showcase of whose political ideals were better. But I feel like because you have an MBA and you have that background in economics, you could throw all the moral things out the way because everyone's going to disagree on what's moral. But when it comes down to the economics, I feel like you could absolutely destroy a guy who hasn't even gone to post-secondary education. That's what I was going.
Who didn't go to post-secondary education, by the way?
I believe Ben doesn't have a post-secondary education, or the other guy, that Hassan Piker was. Isn't
Ben Shapiro a lawyer? Like, doesn't he have a
JD?
Yeah.
Oh, he does?
I
Oh,
thought
okay.
so. I thought
Never
so.
mind. I'm misinformed there.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
listen, David, I would go if asked to appear, I would appear, David. So thanks so much for the call. And it was sort of fun to watch some of those debates, although I just didn't have time to watch that much of a ton of them. Let's go to our next caller from the 617 area code. Going to 617 is always dicey because it's either a local fan or a big-time Boston right-winger. You never know when you go to the 617 area code. Caller from 617, tell us your name, where you're calling from, and what's on your mind today.
Oh, hi, David. It's me, Terry, again. I just wanted to call you because I've been watching your videos on Venezuela, and I think you really are onto something about the significant vocal section of the left/liberals who really do defend the Maduro government and really basically do hardline critiques of the opposition. Basically, I've been reading. I usually like to read this online magazine called Jacobin, and they sometimes publish articles critical of Maduro, but this year they've published several.
Yeah.
And a lot of leftists who are really pro-Maduro have chat asides and even denounced the publication for those articles. So I think it's really interesting how, it's how you can kind of see this in action and all that too.
Yeah, but I thought, Terry, correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, but I thought someone recently sent me a Jacobin article about Venezuela, and I believe that it was super pro-Maduro.
Well, I think they have published some, but they've also published many that aren't. See, the thing with Jacobin is that they don't have a centralized editorial policy, so you can even have situations where two articles published by two different people can argue two very different points and all that too.
Listen,
so for example,
conceptually, I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, listen, let's take it in two steps. The idea of having, allowing for dissenting views within the publication, that's great. I think that that's fantastic. I agree with you, and it sounds like you're sharing my sentiment that there may be some problem among the left with regard to defending the Maduro regime. And, it's not because I'm some kind of elitist white Argentinian that I hate all other South American countries and thus dislike Nicolas Maduro. It's not because I'm Jewish that I criticize the clearly anti-democratic regime of Nicolas Maduro. I'm evaluating the situation at its face based on the facts on the ground rather than the vague ideas of its leftist democratic socialism. And that's where I come away with the view I have. If I'm wrong on the facts, let me know. But ad hominems or the U.S. wants Venezuelan oil, that doesn't really change the facts on the ground. You know, Terry?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually interesting you mentioned ad hominems because I've seen my friends share a lot of memes about the Venezuela. Well, not all my friends, but a small section of my friends share memes about Venezuela, and one of them is this picture of this critic called Ignacio Walker, who's called Maduro a dictator, and they're like, oh my gosh, Ignacio Walker was a big fan of Pinochet during his day. Or there's this other video with this guy named, what was his name again? Here, let me take a look for it. Oh yeah, here we go. Diego Araya, which apparently he had backed the 2002 coup against Hugo Chavez. So they posted this interview that he had with RT, and basically there's this guy from the Empire Files who just calls him out, and it's don't get me wrong. Are there shady figures in the Venezuelan opposition? Absolutely. But it's unfair to paint the opposition like that, basically, just because there are a few bad apples. I mean, obviously you have to be careful about that, but that's not that's not the same thing. It's like saying that somehow Linda Sarsour automatically undermines BLM, feminist marches, and all that too.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you, Terry. Thanks so much for the call. Very well said, very important. And of course, we are not saying that there's no criticisms to be made of the Venezuelan opposition. No doubt about that. We're taking calls at 617-830-4750. Let's go to our next caller from the 417 area code. Caller from 417, tell us who you are and what's on your mind today.
Hey, David. I'm Aaron Talley. I'm from Neosho, Missouri.
Great. What's up?
And I was just wanting to ask you on your opinion of Justice Democrats, a pact that was started by Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski to run primary campaigns against the more corporate Democrat.
Yeah, so I don't know what or who they are supporting specifically. I know conceptually that that's the idea as you stated it. I am sometimes in favor of primarying Democrats, and other times, depending on the situation, I'm not. So, like, for example, people have called in about West Virginia and Joe Manchin. Like, Joe Manchin's probably the most right-wing Democratic senator right now in the Senate. And the idea of primarying him.
Yeah.
And my view is, hey, there are House seats from West Virginia held by Republicans. What about taking the money that you would use to primary Joe Manchin and then maybe end up losing the general election to instead try to win back some of those Republican House seats? So in terms of the what I'd be able to comment on is the strategy of primarying Democrats, and I am open to that idea. I'm not always in favor of it. It sort of depends on the circumstances. It depends on the state. It depends on what impact the primary challenge might have on the eventual general election.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think the better way to go would be to target more states like in, say, Connecticut and Massachusetts that are safer Democratic states that still have the more establishment types of politicians like Ed Markey or former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman, for example.
Yeah, although I think Markey and Lieberman are different. I actually think Markey is not. Markey is closer, I think, to what we want than Lieberman was, for sure. But I understand the idea. And yeah, you don't want to end up turning a seat over to Republicans due to a primary challenge. And I understand the ideology of it, but I also think that we need to be aware of the pragmatics of it, especially when we're trying to take back the House and Senate in 2018. All right, Aaron, very much appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Hope to hear from you again. Let's take a break. We will take calls again, and we will answer some audience questions after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
So we've got a really relevant classic interview this week, my interview from 2014 with Joe Messina. Last week we had a story for you about how American Muslims are more tolerant of, and I know that that's not always the right word to use, but I'll use it here, tolerant of homosexuality than white evangelical Christians in the U.S. And we sort of talked about, is it possible that being persecuted makes you more empathetic to the persecution of other groups? And we jokingly said, if that were true, you'd think Christians would be really empathetic and tolerant right now because they believe that they are actively persecuted in the U.S., even though the evidence doesn't really bear that out. That is exactly what my interview with Joe Messina was about in 2014. It is a very compelling interview. He believes that Christians are suffering from persecution. So that will be our classic interview for this week. It's a doozy. If you are sort of new to the show over the last year or two, you've probably never seen this one. I enjoyed it when it happened, and I think I'm going to enjoy watching it again with you. Let's take a look at it now. I'm joined today by LA-based talk show host Joe Messina. Joe, you've never been on the show before, and it's great to have you on. Always good to talk to new people. You know, I wanted to start off this interview by kind of summarizing this op-ed that your publicist sent to me, but I don't think I can do it justice because I don't know that I fully understand it, to be completely honest with you. I know that it was related to when you said something about Christians and then atheists on Twitter went crazy. So can you kind of sum up this op-ed so we can talk about it?
Well, which one would it be? Because I do a couple a week and I don't know exactly which one.
Yeah, this is the one where you talk about how you do these Faith Fridays on your radio show and you talk to people and about various faiths. And that when you talk about a Christian being persecuted, Twitter lights up, atheists call in, and they're upset about something.
Yeah, I get what I do every week. Like you said, I have a Faith Friday section, which is I keep politics out of it, and I strictly deal with faith.
Okay.
And all kinds of faith. I've had imams and pastors, rabbis, Buddhists, spiritualists. So, because I'm a firm believer that even though I'm rooted in my belief system, a lot of us try to talk about religion as we do with politics, but we don't really know what the other person believes. We hear bits and pieces, in this 140 character world where we try to get our information. And it's not very deep. It doesn't give you a whole bunch anyway.
And what is the belief system you're rooted in, just so everybody knows?
I am a non-denominational Christian.
Okay.
And so what happens is every time I talk about Christians being persecuted, not just Christians, religious people being persecuted, but Christians especially, the atheists get a little irritated with me.
Okay.
And if I poke at the atheists, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but in my estimation, in my humble opinion, atheism is a religion or a belief system, if you would, because you have a belief that nothing exists, or most do. I'm not going to paint them all because some will say to me, I'm not so sure there's a God. I don't really believe
I mean, I think that I think this may be a separate argument, right? Atheism being a religion or not is something that I've talked about a lot on my program. It doesn't meet any of the real criteria of following dogmatic sacred beliefs. It is a system of beliefs that prides itself on evidence over faith, but I don't think that makes it a religion, but that's a separate argument, I think.
Sure, okay, I'll give you that. So what happened is, especially one day in particular, as I was talking about some of the problems that we've had where they want to put up religious things at Christmas time or other holidays during the year. We had a school that was lending itself out and had a cross put up there for the Easter celebration, and they went crazy. I got 44 calls in an hour.
Yeah,
most of them from atheists who were very upset that I would A, say it was a religion, that I would B, say that Christians were the only ones being persecuted. And my comment at that point in time was, well, wait a minute. When are you persecuted like Christians are on certain holidays, holy days, or whatever days you celebrate or don't celebrate?
Right.
And it drives them nuts. And I don't know why. I still say today, and I know it's kind of cliche-ish to say, why does something you don't believe in bother you so much? It doesn't bother me that you don't believe.
I don't know that that's a good barometer, because I interview extreme right-wing Christian guests all the time. And the mere mention from me that some of their beliefs may be completely unfounded beyond what is in the Bible, they get very offended with me. So I could make the same argument, right? If they are so secure in their beliefs, why do they fly off the handle when I question that? So I don't know that simply being upset at your beliefs being questioned is a sign that they are or aren't valid.
But I agree with you.
Okay.
All right. Makes for bad radio. But hey, look, I am secure in my belief system, right? You can't do anything that's going to make me crazy.
So what you're saying is there's no evidence you could be presented with that would make you change your beliefs?
Nope.
So that means that your beliefs are completely disconnected from reality, right? You're taking the Ken Ham point of view that he did in the Bill Nye debate, where Bill Nye was asked, what might change your beliefs? And Bill Nye said evidence. And Ken Ham was asked, what would change? But hold on a second, hold on.
Go ahead.
Ken Ham was asked, what would change your beliefs? And Ken Ham said, nothing. How is that a rational worldview if nothing would ever change it?
When you say nothing will change, let's put it this way. Everybody has a belief system.
Okay.
Okay. Again, like you said, not religious, but everybody has a belief system.
Definitely.
I don't know you that well, but do you believe in evolution?
I do believe in evolution.
Okay. And I could say the same thing to you. You can't prove it. And even evolutionists say they can't prove it. And when you take it to the simplest level, because not you, but the generic you like to pound on Christians like me to say, you guys don't believe in science and you don't give any credence to science. Yes, we do. We don't believe science came along in and of itself. We believe that God put those things in order, and we just call it science today.
The problem with that, though, Joe. Yeah, go ahead. All right, Joe.
I want to know where, if this Big Bang theory that everybody talks about, I want to know, where did the gases come from? If we had absolutely nothing, and all of a sudden two things came out of nothing and then got together, had an explosion, and sent this whole thing into this beautiful universe that we have, you're telling me that takes no faith to believe?
Here's the thing, though, Joe. Here's the thing. I want to get back to this issue of the Christian oppression for a second, but just to address this for a second, when you have holes in science, science is a cumulative process that builds on the work of the previous scientists. The fact that not every question that can be imagined has a scientific answer today is not evidence of God or that sacred texts are accurate. And this is the problem, that there's been this pseudo-anti-intellectualism that is connected to literal religious beliefs in this country that opens the door to saying your lack of 100% certitude on an answer to my questions is evidence that my God exists exactly as I say my God exists. And that's just bogus.
No, my comment would be that the fact that there is more than just one or two holes is proof that you don't have it all together in the scientific world. And for you to say that, okay, well, we can't explain where the gases come from, but we know it's real. And we can't explain an evolution where the transitional fossils might be that you can't find, but we know that's real. Okay, and then you have this time period. I can't remember what it's called, but you have a time period in evolution where all of a sudden, all these species pop up out of nowhere. Well, there's no evolution there. So to say that you've got proof and we have to teach this as reality, it holds the same water as me saying I'm going to teach God as reality.
No, it's completely different. And, you and I aren't going to agree on this, and I know that. But so what I want to get back to is this. The problem I think some atheists have with what you talked about earlier, which is talking about Christian oppression and Christians being discriminated against, is this. Do you think that discriminating against someone for being black, hypothetical, is exactly the same as someone whose religion tells them that black people are inferior to white people is discriminated against if it's not legal to have a sign on your door saying we don't serve black people? In other words, is anything under the guise of a religious belief valid and completely immune from criticism, or would you call it discrimination no matter what?
Okay, if you want to get to the black and white thing, black person can't change their skin color any more than
a gay person can change their sexual orientation.
Well, that's a discussion for a different day. Okay?
Again, that's not though, because there's no science at all that suggests anyone chooses to be gay.
If we're talking about whether God exists or not, that's not the conversation today when we're talking about Christians being persecuted, but the gay issue is a conversation we can have today, right? So anyway, let's get back to a black person cannot change their skin color, all right? And as far as persecution goes toward blacks, I know what you're getting at because I know other talk show hosts that have had me on and said the same thing. Look, unless you're a studier of the Bible, it's easy to throw out little catchphrases and things that Christians have said over the years. If you really think that I'm going to sit here and tell you that everything that comes out of a Christian's mouth is true and real and all of that, it's not.
You would be crazy to say that. I'm glad you're not saying that.
Right. All right. So we got Christians that blow up abortion clinics in the name of God. I don't know what God they're talking about. It's not my God. My God doesn't tell me to do that. Okay.
Good.
I got Christians out shooting abortion doctors in the name of God. My God doesn't tell me to do that. Okay. So we've got nut jobs, we'll say, in every realm. Okay. Could we agree on that?
We could agree on that. In the U.S., we see that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. So as far as I think the original question was, you're talking about refusing to service to people and that kind of stuff. I think you can look at, we're in a country that gives you the freedom to serve or not serve, to do or not do. So if you come into my restaurant and I don't want to serve you, even though it's legal, I don't want to serve you because you come in with the I don't know, let's get ridiculous for a minute, all right? It looks like you haven't washed your hair in 25 years or something like that. Yep. I don't want you in my restaurant. I don't have a right to do that?
Well, there are certain protected classes of people, right? So there are certain reasons, and so the same way we have employment non-discrimination. So we could certainly pick ones that are protected and that aren't protected. But I think, I don't want to misstate your position, Joe. What you're getting at is, if it's based on a characteristic that someone has chosen rather than something they were born with, you're okay with discriminating in that sense.
If it's based on something someone has chosen.
You've said if you're born black, so that one you think is not an okay one. But if it's something someone has chosen.
What if you're born with you've got one arm shorter than the other? Some people get all wigged out about physical things that people are born and not born with. You know what? You can't change that. There's nothing you can do about that. And everybody deserves a right, the handicapped
ADA.
Yeah, right. The ADA. That's great. That's fine. I'm all for that. Everybody should have the opportunity to be able to go to restaurants and go to stores and be able to move around.
I agree with you, but what about the characteristics that are changeable? It sounds like you're more okay with saying, I don't want to serve someone who falls under that umbrella.
Yeah, I should have a right not to serve. Yeah, if somebody comes in the store with a shirt that says, blank you and the horse you rode in on.
Right.
You know what?
So then the obvious question, Joe, becomes, what is more arbitrary, self-professed, optional, and not something you're born with than religion?
Oh, well, religion obviously is a choice you make, right? So if you walk in the door and I'm in your restaurant, and I decide to bow my head and pray over my food, and a guy walks up and says, "We'll have no praying in here." The difference between me and some other people's, I'm not going to go sue him. I'm going to leave the food on the table. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to let my Christian friends in that area know this guy doesn't allow prayer in his restaurant.
That's you personally, though, right? But religion is a protected class in this country.
It is not a protected class. If it was a protected class, you wouldn't see all the lawsuits and other things going on in this country. Like,
but those are for imposing religious beliefs on others. It's bad. See, this is exactly where we get into it. Intolerance of discrimination is not discrimination, and I think that's the crux of it, Joe.
Intolerance of discrimination
is not discrimination.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, look, when you sit there and you tell me, I was listening to one of your shows where you were talking. I can't remember was it the Arkansas Supreme Court justice?
Could be Alabama, I think.
I'm sorry, Alabama. It wouldn't take the 10 Commandments off I think it was the front lawn. It wasn't even inside.
Yeah.
But a bunch of hypocrites at the Supreme Court who also had the 10 Commandments up on the wall. So he can't have them on the front lawn, but the Supreme Court can have them on the wall. That's okay.
All right. Well, listen, that's another story. That's another story. It's been a real pleasure having you on, Joe. We did go 3 minutes over because it is such an interesting conversation. Hey, it's not your fault. I'm running the show here. I would love to have you back anytime, even if we don't agree. We've been talking to Joe Messina, LA-based talk show host. Check out his show. He has a politically incorrect area going on in his studio, so I'm sure our audience will love it. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, the audience questions have been getting better and better the last several months, and we've got some really good ones here. Tyler wrote in saying, hey guys, people often overestimate how dangerous certain things are, like, for example, commercial aviation. What do people drastically underestimate the danger of? This is a good question. I mean, just for a second to stick with the aviation example, although commercial aviation in the United States is incredibly safe, I do think that some people believe that piloting small single-engine propeller planes is basically just as safe as commercial aviation, and that's not. So I think that there are people that overestimate the safety of non-commercial small plane piloting. But I think just driving in the car every day is something that you can't think of the reality that statistically getting into a car is orders of magnitude more dangerous than getting on a commercial American airline plane. And if you did, it would almost be crippling, because in most of the country, you get into cars constantly without thinking. It is far more dangerous than the average person is sort of cognizant of every time they get into a car.
Probably because you do it just about every day, so it's part of the routine. You're completely desensitized to it. Whereas if you're going to be taking a flight somewhere, or if you're going to do something like adventurous as, skydiving, then there's all this build up to it, and you have time to think about what could possibly go wrong.
I think that that's a good point. And I think that some similar applies to the ocean, where, I mean, I want to be clear. I don't want to irrationally overstate the danger of some of these things, but getting into the ocean, assuming, listen, if there is a riptide, I'll easily be able to swim out of it. Most people actually don't know how to swim, get out of the danger caused by a riptide. I don't know that I do, and I'm an okay swimmer. I think on a day-to-day basis, from a statistical point of view, most people drastically underestimate the violence with which the ocean could take you in.
How about carnival rides? I know there was that 18-year-old kid who died a few weeks ago at the Ohio State Fair due to corrosion on one of the rides. And, maybe at an amusement park, those things in mass aren't too dangerous. But given the fact that these carnivals are going from town to town and have to be set up and torn down over and over again, and many times they're old, I'd imagine that's pretty dangerous.
Yeah,
too.
I think so too. And also, there's been a lot. We talk a lot about how homeopathy is medically bogus, but there is an aspect of so-called natural supplements and medications that is dangerous, because just because something is, quote, all natural and contains sort of unregulated products in the sense that they don't need to be regulated because they're herbs or plants or whatever the case may be, that also is part of the danger. And you can have interactions between so-called all-natural products and medications that are prescribed to you that can be very, very dangerous. And I think a lot of people don't think about that. I know a lot of people who say, when I have X symptoms, and sometimes it's allergies, sometimes it's a cold, sometimes it's sleeplessness, they'll buy a cocktail of over-the-counter stuff, assuming like, listen, if any of this was really that strong, it would require a prescription. That may be true, but in large doses or in combination with other things, a lot of that stuff can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, especially if it's in combination with, say, alcohol too, because of course, there's going to be warnings about not drinking while you're on the drug, but some people just think that that's over an overall health concern.
People ignore that generally. Yeah. One other one, because we mentioned the ocean. Saving someone from drowning is incredibly dangerous. It is very common that if you really don't know how to save someone who's drowning, you end up being drowned or at risk of drowning yourself.
Really?
And a lot of people don't know that, because someone who is drowning is going to basically be using the person trying to save them to get above water. And the way you do that is by pulling them under. And if you're not properly trained at saving someone from drowning, you could die potentially. And
what are you supposed to do? Wait till they pass out?
I honestly, I don't know what the right thing is to do. Like, if you see someone drowning and you're not properly trained, most people would have trouble just ignoring that, right? You would feel compelled to do something. Anyway, those are a few ideas. Great question, Tyler. Like that one. Lisa wrote in, what are your excuses for leaving really lame events? My go-to is that I have to get up really early the next day. And I know that that's so lame. And there's a funny Seinfeld about when Elaine has some boyfriend who said he had to go home, he had to get up early the next day, so he had to leave instead of going up to her place or something like that. Jerry jokingly says, other than like a farmer, nobody has to get up so early the next day that you wouldn't go upstairs if a woman invites you upstairs, which it's sort of a joke. But I use that pretty often. I just say, I've got to get up early the next day or whatever. Although there are better ones that people could use. Like if you have a kid, that's the best thing, which is we got to get home, Pat Jr. has got to, whatever, something's going on with Pat Jr. We got to get home to feed the dog. That's one that is lame, but it actually does work and it's completely realistic. I don't know. Those are some of the common ones I think of.
Or you can just leave it a bit more ambiguous, like, oh, I have a medical thing to attend to. I have a doctor's appointment.
Well, I've got to go home to
family emergency.
I have to go take my insulin. Right. I mean, that would be one that I see. Now, I think it's bad karma, even though I don't believe in karma, to anytime use medical excuses that don't actually apply to you, because I feel like even though I don't believe in karma, and I don't even really believe in luck, I believe in odds, I still just think it's not good to use illness. Like I never pretended to be sick to call out of work because I thought it's just bad, because then when I'm really sick, then it's not going to be believed or whatever the case may be. So I generally shy away from that. But if you really do have some kind of medical reason, those are very good reasons to leave some kind of event.
If you're in a big audience where it's not going to really be noticed if you leave entirely and don't come back, I don't even think you have to give an excuse. You can just kind of head out the door and people will assume you're going to the bathroom or something.
That's called the Irish goodbye. And I have no idea if that's an offensive term. I genuinely have no idea. But and I don't know where it came from. And I really hope it doesn't have to do with like drinking or that it's offensive in some way. But a lot of my friends talk about how they always do the Irish goodbye, which is when they're at a party. They don't say bye to anybody. They just disappear. And then people will just assume, oh, I must have just missed when they were saying bye.
Sure.
And talk to them the next day or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, or even if it's at like a boring event where you're listening to someone speak, you can just head out the door. I don't want to listen to that stuff.
I prefer to have good ways. Like for me, the issue is I now say no to lots of events. So I'm less commonly at events I don't want to be at, but I'm often in conversations I don't want to be in with specific people. So you can't really do this at like a wedding, for example, because it would just come off as rude. But at any kind of business event I've found, and someone taught this to me, the great Tom Wall of Western Massachusetts fame taught me this one, which is if you want to cut off a conversation at anything business related, at any point, you just ask for a card. This will create a situation where the person you're talking to has to get the card. And it's not rude because you're so interested in this person that you're asking for a card, presumably to contact them again at some point in the future. And then as soon as they hand you the card, you immediately put out your hand and you say, thanks so much. Really nice talking to you.
That's good.
And you've created a situation where, okay, we've exchanged cards and shaken hands. Clearly, the conversation has now ended.
There's nothing else to do at
There's nothing else to do at that point. Yeah. That's a really good one that generally seems to work for me.
I like that one.
Yeah, try that one, Pat, if you need to at some point. Next question is from Sienna. You've talked about useless college degrees. What about useless jobs or professions? All right. Now, I know I'm going to offend many people in our audience, as well as many friends of mine who work in this profession with what I'm about to say. And I'm not saying it to be demeaning to the individuals who work in this profession, but I believe that this is a superfluous profession that really exists only from convention, and that it could be phased out if we decided it's over. Real estate agents. And let me explain. In modern 2017, in most states, unless there's a state that is really avoiding this to try to keep real estate agents in business, you don't really need a real estate agent to suggest houses for you to look at. You set up an online search, you go to realtor.com, whatever. You, for the most part, in most states, have full access to everything that is on the market that your realtor would. Now, the realtor would argue, I know about listings that have not yet come on the market.
Yeah.
And I could maybe tell you about them before they're listed.
Or I know the things to look for
Or I know the things
at
to look
the
for.
certain house, apartment,
But
condo.
by and large, anybody who's remotely comfortable on the internet can look for the houses and properties that they want to look at. In addition, you don't actually need a realtor to participate in the negotiation process. Some people are uncomfortable with that. But at the same time, if nobody had a realtor, then it would be much less of a big deal. Right now, the realtors talk to each other, the buyer and seller's agent. You could talk to the seller directly if you wanted to. And basically what the realtors are doing is they're just skimming 2 to 5%, depending on buyer's agent, seller's agent, what kind of a contract you may have, 2 to 6%, off the top of every real estate transaction. The same realtor can sell the same house multiple times, and just every time skim 2 to 6% off the top. And I know that I will get emails from people saying, David, you don't understand this value of the realtor, that value. They coordinate the inspection. They do all these things. There is no reason that you couldn't, I don't know, if it was the convention that when you have a lawyer when you buy or sell a property, it could be the convention that the lawyer's paralegal, which when it comes to real estate deals, the paralegals are typically doing a lot of the work, assuming that the law firm you're working with is big enough that there are paralegals. The paralegal coordinates the inspection or whatever the case may be. I have no problem working with realtors. My realtor here in Massachusetts was a friend of mine that I went to high school with. With peace and love, it's all great. But we could easily restructure it so that you don't constantly get 2 to 6% being skimmed off the top by realtors on every real estate transaction.
I would have to agree. And it seems like when we discuss this topic, we're tabling the occupations that are going to be replaced with automation or just newer technologies.
Yeah.
Like coal miners are kind of going out the door right now.
I'm not talking about those.
Self-service is, replacing the need for people to check you out, or
Yep.
taxi drivers going away because of Uber drivers.
I also want to mention car salespeople. And really, there are studies that show that car salespeople increase the amount of profit for the dealership. That's their function. It's not clear that car salespeople are responsible for a net increase in the total number of cars sold. Yes, someone might be influenced by a salesperson to buy one car instead of another. Someone might be influenced to buy a car sooner than they otherwise would. But by and large, car salespeople don't put new buyers into the market. They merely either accelerate or direct or make those transactions more expensive. There's no reason that you need salespeople in order to sell cars.
What about like a security guard? I mean, a lot of these places, like let's say you go to a mall or a bookstore,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like the potential that you're saving by, preventing someone from stealing a book or some of the merchandise there is going to be cost effective when you consider the fact that you have to pay the salary of the person watching the store.
I've thought about that.
A lot of the times I think they're, kind of useless.
There's a lot of stores like on Newbury Street in Boston and some high-end malls where you walk by and there's a security guard standing at the door and they're there all the time. And I think to myself, this is a place that's open normal business hours. It's very surprising to me that the business would calculate that paying this full-time security guard actually is going to outweigh whatever possible theft or burglary losses might take place.
Maybe if it's a jewelry store and some of the products there are in the 5 figures or something.
But I still think that part of it is not just a cost benefit. Part of it is the idea that it portrays a really luxurious brand, because it's sort of the marketing value of there's a security guard because this is really nice stuff.
And people are safe when they go there. I mean, you don't want people to be scared when they're looking through books and other little trinkets.
Although some people would probably be intimidated by the presence of a security guard. But I don't think the calculation is how much is the security guard's salary, which probably is usually really, really low, I would argue, versus how much is likely to be stolen. It's how much will we attract because of the apparent prestige of needing a security guard. It's the idea that they need a security guard that will attract customers. Anyway, that's just one idea. Really good questions this week. Send in your thoughts. We've got a great bonus show coming up for you today. The last bonus show and the last show today before the planned David Pakman Show summer vacation. The show is not going off the air. Please, please, please don't email me next week worried that the show has been canceled. It hasn't. If the show were canceled, we would have weeks or even months talking about that. The show is not canceled. We're just going on summer vacation, and we will be back after that summer vacation. But this isn't the end. If you're a member, then you've still got today's bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.